Hey, you are listening to the Victims and Villains podcast, a podcast that dares to educate and engage individuals like yourselves on mental health awareness and suicide prevention through pop culture. And on this episode, there is nothing quite pop culture enough like the Cape Crusader himself, because we're talking about the Batman. My name is Captain Nostalgia, and with me, I have a filmmaker, but not just any filmmaker. I have a filmmaker who is the director behind one of our Horrific Hope 2022 official selection features. The movie's called Edwin. Please help me in welcoming Mr. Stuart-G-Robertson. What's going on tonight?
I'm doing pretty well, thanks. Thank you for having me on your show.
Dude, I'm really excited to to not only have you on the show today, but also to be bringing Edwin to our first ever film festival. This was a delight to watch the first time. I kind of didn't know really what I was walking into. Michael Lake, who is the film's star, and I had exchanged a couple messages on social media. And when I was able to actually see this feature, I was really delighted just by how many twists and turns I got. And just when I thought I figured out the story, oh snap, there's another twist.
Yeah. Yeah, that's pretty much what I strive to do from the very beginning when we were writing the film. What I wanted to do was I wanted to be like, you know what, the audience is like, I want to take this audience onto this journey and have so many twists and turns throughout. And just when the audience thinks they have it figured out, and it's like, boom, there's another twist, there's another thing that's happening. And what I love about the film so much is I don't think many people will actually see the end coming. Like the final twist at the final part of the film is just mind blowing.
And I really don't want to spoil too much for it. And in fact, when we were putting together our sizzle reel for it, like I was like taking moments out of like each movie that was going to be like advertising the festival. I ended up taking one of Edwin's dream sequences out for that particular one. So I was kind of like, all right, like this makes it look like it's just an ordinary slasher, but it's in fact so much more. And you want to give us kind of like an elevator pitch for what this story is?
Yeah, so basically Edwin's about a young screenwriter, and he's trying to write his masterpiece of a screenplay. And it's just all of these stories, all these ideas that come to him, and then all of a sudden it's like he's going down this dark path, and it's like he doesn't know what's real, what's not real, and there's all these twists and turns in it. And honestly, I don't want to spoil too much or pretty much anything about the film at all. But it's one of those films that you really have to see it to believe it, because I will say one thing: it's not what you think.
It's not by any stretch of the imagination. And one of the things that, and I'm going to be pretty obscure as a cinephile, like I will pretty much watch anything. I know that sounds like I accept kind of terrible cinema in there as well, but it's part of the love of the genre. And way back in the turn of the millennium, there was this tiny little movie, which is like almost near impossible to find now. It's called Cabin by the Lake. And in it, Judd Nelson plays.
Yeah, I've seen that.
Yeah.
I've seen that.
That's kind, if you know what that movie is, I'm not going to spoil anything for it. It's a great movie. It's super hard to find. I'm sure it's out there in the dark web somewhere, but that's kind of what Edwin reminded me of. And that's kind of one of the reasons that like I liked it so much, was because like to me, it felt like, if you've seen Cabin by the Lake, you know, it's kind of like this like little gem, but it's like also one of those things that like you've seen it, so like other people haven't, so you kind of feel like you're privy to like some kind of like exclusive information. And I love the fact that Edwin kind of has that vibe to it, but then again, it doesn't. Like it's kind of it extrovert, like we've been saying, like it definitely makes like left turns and right turns that you're just not expecting.
Yeah, it's funny too because when I was writing it, so I was like, oh, I have to give the audience something. I have to make the audience believe it's going to go down this path. So I decided to go down the certain path, which I won't spoil again. And it's like, oh, for people in the audience be like, oh, I saw that coming. It's like, yeah, but you're not going to see the next scene that's going to come. And that's basically what I wanted to do. And we had such a tight budget making this film, so like the fact that we were able to pull it off is just amazing.
Now, this is going to be the first time that it is playing in Virginia. It is going to be being a part of our mental health block. This is a block of films that is going to be playing with Demented, which is a spin on telekinesis from Spain. Escape, a ghost story, a hilarious horror comedy about three employees that have to make it through a twisted game of escape rooms in order to make it out to their next shift. And then While Mortals Sleep, which is coming to us from Sundance, which, again, the less you know, the better for this one. And Edwin is going to be playing alongside of all of these great shorts, beginning 11:45 on Saturday, April 30th. We're gonna have tickets on sale soon, so you guys can actually see Edwin. But we're here for the Batman, and I think that this conversation is gonna go rather long, so I'm just gonna jump into it. And I think it's fitting that you're on the Batman episode because when I was rewatching Edwin, I really like the use of reds that your film has, and kind of also thought it was interesting that like the Batman also has uses of like really deep shades of like red and kind of likes to play a lot the mind games. All right. Well, I've seen this movie way more than you probably have.
How many times have you seen it?
As of this recording, I've seen it 3 times.
Holy moly! Okay, I've only seen it
Yeah.
once. and I went in strictly on an entertainment level, so I haven't even analyzed it or anything. But it was quite breathtaking.
And that's what we're here to kind of deconstruct this as we go along through it and talk about the themes of mental health, what this means moving forward with this new Earth 2 Batman universe that Matt Reeves is giving us. But yeah, just kind of some of your general thoughts on this before we get into spoilers.
Well, for the Batman, it was weird because I didn't really have any high expectations for the film. Not that I had any expectations at all. I thought it was going to be good, but I didn't expect it to be as good as it was. I think the big issue a lot of people had was before going into the film was Robert Pattinson able to pull off being the Batman, and honestly, he was ace. It was absolutely incredible as the Batman. And another thing I really like about the Batman as well, which was different from previous Batman films, was it was focused on the Batman. Whereas previous Batman films they tried to balance between Batman and Bruce Wayne. And I'm glad that I always say there's only about 10 minutes of footage of actual Bruce Wayne in the film. Maybe 15, but there's not much. So it's basically a detective story, Batman solving Riddler's crimes. And I thought it was fantastic.
Oh man, you kind of hit exactly what I love so much about this movie too. I think you absolutely are 100% right. Is that this is the first time that we've ever gotten a live action Batman story where it's actually focused on Batman. It's not like you're having to split between Bruce Wayne and Batman, or you're getting to kind of see like the Wayne industry stuff and kind of like having conversations with him and Alfred. Like this is pretty much like 90 to 95% of this movie is Batman. It's him in the suit. And I think what makes this film so exceptional when you talk about the landscape of Batman movies is that this is the first one that actually feels timeless. Not to say that Batman, I'm sorry, The Dark Knight doesn't feel timeless. Because I'm sure that Dark Knight is going to come up at some point in this conversation. But I think that for this one, because it is going with that noir tale, because it is feeling so much like just a straight up detective story, it gives it that timeless edge that I feel like a lot of other Batman movies up to this point we haven't really had.
Yeah, I would agree with that. It's I didn't know what to expect, like I said, and just seeing how the characters unfold. And I'm gonna say, like, as good as Robert Pattinson was as the Batman, let's just say Paul Dano as the Riddler. Wow, I have never seen a performance like that. And I'm not gonna say he's better than Heath Ledger in The Dark Knight or anything like that, but he gives a run for his money. Like, he steals the show. Like, even the interrogation sequence, out of this world. And I'll also add as well, Colin Farrell is the Penguin. Uh, you can see it in the eyes that it's Colin Farrell, but other than that, he's completely unrecognizable, and it's just so good. It's just the casting is fantastic for it, and it just wraps itself up into like a really, really good Batman movie.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And I'm actually going to put the official spoiler warning on this right now because I feel like we're probably going to get into some spoilers as we kind of deconstruct a lot of the cast. Like you said, like the casting for this is just insanely phenomenal. We talked about Robert Pattinson. To call Pattinson's Batman one of the best we've ever seen would be a massive understatement. And I know that like there was so many people that had fears and concerns coming into this movie because, well, Robert Pattinson's last big budget thing was Harry Potter.
Let's not talk about that movie.
And Twilight. Yeah. So you had a lot of people that are like, oh, this is so dumb, but like people that are complaining hadn't also seen what he was capable of in the world of independent cinema with Good Time and The Lighthouse and Cosmopolitan or Cosmopolitan, whatever it's called. And I think that they're able, he really kind of shut everyone up during this one because he's one of the things that I had noticed on like subsequent viewings is, and I don't know if you caught this, is that his Batman is able to convey a lot of emotion without really even saying a word. It's the way that he moves his body. It's the way that his eyes react to things. There's a scene between. Go ahead.
Oh, sorry. I was just gonna say, I can only compare Robert Pattinson as the Batman. I can't really compare him. I can't really judge him as Bruce Wayne because he's not really he doesn't really, we don't really see his character as much as Bruce Wayne. So like just seeing Robert Pattinson as the Batman is incredible, and he may even be my favorite Batman. I'll say that right now. He may even be my favorite Batman. My previous favorite Batman was I'll probably get a lot of flack for this, but was Ben Affleck. Because Ben Affleck was an incredible Batman, not a very good Bruce Wayne, but was a very good Batman. But Robert Pattinson is incredible as Batman. But I would like to see a sequel where maybe that delves more into Bruce Wayne's story and seeing how Robert Pattinson handles the Bruce Wayne side a little bit more. But other than that, phenomenal Batman.
Yeah, I think you bring up a good point that it's really difficult to kind of say where his Bruce Wayne lies. Yes. I think his Bruce Wayne is a solid depiction for what this world needs and kind of the emotional journey of the character that he comes out when it is crucial for him to come out. But the majority of the time we just see the Batman. And I think, one of the things that makes it such a phenomenal Batman, because I will probably say that I'm right there with you. Like, this is probably like my new favorite Batman. Mine previous to this was Bale, just
Yeah,
because like Bale for me was like someone I grew up with.
like
And The Dark
and
Knight.
Bill's a great Batman. He's my favorite
Yeah.
Bruce Wayne. He's got that arrogant millionaire status, you know, like he throws these parties and he doesn't care if he embarrasses everyone, you know, that's Bruce Wayne, you know. Um, Christian Bale is Bruce Wayne, absolutely out of this world, and he's really good as Batman. It's just I feel like Christian Bale's Batman, we just uh, the fighting's a bit stiff, you know. But that's that's on the costume too. So like, so there's that. Like Robert-Pattinson's Batman, it's just so gritty, and you know what actually reminded me of when I was watching it. It reminded me
Oh.
of the movie Watchmen.
Mm.
You know, the themes and the whole voiceovers and everything, and the whole opening sequence. I was like, dude, you've taken this from a page from Watchmen, and it works so brilliantly. You know, and then you have the whole narrative throughout the whole film, and I was like, you know, this got Watchmen vibes written all over it. I don't know if
I,
you caught onto that or
I did actually, and like I'm showing Stuart my Watchmen tattoo right now.
awesome.
Um, Watchmen's my favorite book of all time. So like I actually last night after coming home from the theater, I picked up my copy of Watchmen and just started reading it because
Nice.
I love the Rorschach take on the character, that it still remains like it is Batman, but
Mhm.
it it has that homage to Rorschach there that I think
Yes.
it just echoes the vibes of it. And I think it's actually if I remember correctly, like Alan Moore said that like his take on the character of Rorschach was like this idea of like, what if Batman didn't pull his punches? What if Batman was like brutal in his journey for answers and questions? And that's where you get the Rorschach character from. So I love the idea that you're able to kind of have that come full circle while still remaining true to the Batman character.
Mhm. No, it's agreed. It was a nice little nod. It was a nice little nod for Watchmen to creep into that. Like every time the narration came on, I was like, you know what, this is a throwback, and it works so perfectly. And what I really liked about the opening was it's like you have he's doing his detective work at the Batman, and he's saying, "Oh, you got to. I can't just be everywhere at once. I have to choose and see what happens." And it's just breaking it all down, and then it leads to that whole gang sequence, which I thought it was really cool because I I don't know if it connects later on, but you see spoilers like later on in the film. It's like at the church, for example, when the guy's like, "I know you," you know, and I'm thinking to myself, "Well, do you know him from that gang sequence?" I don't know. I don't know if you've seen the movie 3 times, so I could be completely off about this, you know. But he says the guy at the church says, "I know you," and then at the end of the film, when the guy says, "I am vengeance," the wannabe says, "I am vengeance." And I'm thinking to myself, "Oh, is that all related to the gang sequence at the very beginning of the film?"
So it's actually not.
Oh no, okay.
I no, I think the theme of vengeance here is I actually read a article. I don't remember where it was at, but it talks about like the characterization of Batman throughout the course of this, where like this is his, as he says in the intro, like this is his second year
Yeah, the
of
second year,
being
yes.
this mass vigilante, and a portion of what that is also him trying to find stuff. So it's like, wow, yes, like there are certain moments within the film where like you can kind of tell like this is a detective story, but he has not earned the moniker world's greatest detective yet.
Right.
And a portion of that is the fact that like there are scenes particularly where like they're trying to figure out like who the rat with wings is.
Mhm.
They initially think it's the Penguin, and it ends up being Falcone. And you can kind of see those mistakes, like he misreads Selena at one point, and is kind of like taken back by this like emotional baggage and like ties that she has to Carmine Falcone. And I really love the fact that this movie isn't afraid to show Batman making mistakes. But to your
Yes.
point, it's not. And I think a portion of it is he's thinking more with his fists than he is his actual mind. So I think that's where you get the theme of vengeance comes from, and there's a tonal shift at the end of the movie once the like arena has been flooded and he's kind of like moving the debris. You can kind of see the hesitation of people like wanting to like actually come up to him.
Right.
And that's go ahead.
Well, it was the child. They were afraid of him. Well, I got they were afraid of the Batman when he was down in the water. They were afraid of him, and it was the child who remembered him from previous scenes that came and said, "Come." And the child follows, and then everyone else follows after him. It's like, oh, he's not. It's like, oh, he's there to help. That's what I gathered from it.
Yeah, you're absolutely correct. It is the child, but like also that's a turning point for his character because he's no longer this vengeance kind of thing. Because you also see it when it's that rooftop scene between him, Kenzie, Selena, and Gordon, where Selena wants to shoot him, and his policy on no guns, famous from the comics. You don't use guns because then you'll end up being exactly like him. And when the guy from the church is unmasked to be one of the Riddler wannabes, he talks about how he's vengeance, and you can kind of see it in his eyes. The way that he reacts to it is like, I have inspired this, and that was never my goal, was to inspire this. And I think that's kind of also a turning point for his character. But that character in particular that you're referring to, I think the reason why he says, "I know you," is the same reason that we see in Batman Begins, where it's him and Carmine Falcone are having that conversation in the docks. And he's like, "You're Bruce Wayne. You're the Prince of Gotham. You have to walk 1,000 miles to away from Gotham City before anyone didn't know your name." I think that kind of same rule applies.
Yeah, I gathered that when I was watching it. I was like, oh, it's because he's Bruce Wayne. But then I was like, you know what? Maybe there's something a little bit deeper into this, because we only see in the opening scene these gang members with all the makeup on, and if you look from the nose down, there's not too many people that have, there's not too many people that have that jawline, So I always think it was, maybe read between the lines a wee bit, but it all makes sense that it's because he is Bruce Wayne, and it's like, you come out, you don't come out and show gatherings, and people are very shocked at you that so like that totally makes sense.
Well, let's talk about that scene in particular. So there was a lot of buzz around this movie leading up to it that, yes, we were going to be getting a brand new take on Penguin, Joker, the Riddler, Catwoman, Batman, Gordon, Alfred, Carmine Falcone. I mean, just these classic characters that we've seen time and time again. But as I mentioned just a few seconds ago, we also got a new take on the Joker, who was played in this one by Barry Keoghan, who most people might remember more recently from another comic book movie, which we did an episode on back in November, The Eternals. And I think so. Matt Reeves has gone on record and during the press for this and kind of said that, like, there was supposed to be a earlier scene where the Joker was like actually interacting with Batman on how to catch the Riddler, and two, he had Batman caught him pretty early on. And so I think the gang that we meet, they are our Batman introduction scene, so to say. I think that is an homage to the Joker, because there have been Joker gangs that the comics have actually explored. kind of like cult followings that have been set up. And I want to say it was Scott Snyder, I think, actually more recently that did that and did an incredible job with that, but kind of showcasing how the Joker's twisted view of life can sometimes ultimately play to a larger crowd. And much like we see with the Riddler here, you can kind of also see that like there are people that want to follow after violence, essentially.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I gotta say I'm kind of glad that the previous scene that Matt Reeves was talking about how it was gonna be like set up like a Hannibal Lecter type scene with Batman present the case of the Riddler to him. I'm kind of glad that was cut from the film because it didn't take away from the rest of the film and his introduction at the very end of the film. It was a nice surprise because you didn't really see what the Joker looks like. You get the voice and that. And to be honest with you, for sequels down the road, I personally wouldn't have the Joker in the sequels. I'd be like more like Joker in the shadows sort of thing. In Arkham Asylum, like you could even have a film based on Arkham Asylum, but we'll talk about that later. But it was a nice little cameo from the actor. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. I really hope that we are not going to see him come to fruition because not only do we have a unnecessary sequel on the way to Joaquin Phoenix's Joker, we're getting
it's just too much Joker, I think.
Yeah, and I get the fact that you want to have Batman and Joker be together. I understand that. Like, I 100% get that. But I want to see other characters that we haven't seen come to life. I mean, the way that I have theories about where you could go, and I'll get into those later. But, I mean, this potentially we could see Hush for the first time ever be taken on a big screen. You can redeem the character of Mr. Freeze.
You could have Clayface. You could have
Clayface, Bane.
There's so many directions you could take this in. And the thing I find really surprising is, do you remember a couple of years ago when the studios were like, "Oh, we can't have the DC movies too dark because we're gonna be a little bit lighter." Yeah.
Yeah.
The whole DC universe, that whole thing was like, oh, it's too dark. We gotta go lighter. So they make Shazam, and they brighten it up with that Harley Quinn movie, which was just absolutely terrible. So you bring in Matt Reeves to do the Batman, which is probably the darkest version of Batman we've witnessed, and it's like, oh, let's continue down, and I hope they continue to go down that path for the sequels and make it still as dark, because they've set the groundwork in place and it really works. But only time will tell what will happen in the sequel. I wouldn't do Arkham Asylum in the second one. I know there's things around on the internet saying, "Oh, that should be the sequel." Me personally, I would leave that for the third one, and have like elements of Ben Affleck's story into Arkham Asylum. But that's just me.
If you or someone you know is listening to this podcast right now and you're struggling with suicide, addiction, self-harm, or depression, we encourage you guys to please reach out. This is the heartbeat of why we do what we do. Suicide is currently the 10th leading cause of death in the United States, and as of this recording, there are 132 suicides that take place each and every day on American soil. And when you scale back internationally, there are 800,000 successful suicides. That is one death roughly every 40 seconds. So if you or someone you know is struggling, you guys can go to victimsandvillains.net/hope. That resource is going to be right in the description wherever you guys are currently listening or streaming this. There you'll find resources that include the National Suicide Lifeline, which is 1-800-273-8255. You can also text HELP to 741-741. We also have a plethora of other resources, including churches, getting connected with counselors, LGBT resources like the Trevor Project, and also veteran hotline as well. Please, if you hear nothing else in the show, understand that you listening to this right now, have value and worth. We get it. Suicide, depression, mental health, these are hard topics, and the stigma around them doesn't make it any easier. But please consider the resources right in the descriptions below, wherever you guys are listening, because once again, you have value and you have worth. So please stay with us.
So there's a lot to deconstruct in what you just deconstruct and respond to what you just said. So I think is when you look at Zack Snyder's take on the DC characters is a great example. When you look at something like Man of Steel and BVS, they are and his Snyder cut, the tone of those movies gives from darker to dark to lighter to light, and there's a gradual there's a gradualness there, that it's not just like this drastic where it's like, oh, we're going from something like Shazam to Joker tonally, and that's just what it's going to be, and you're not getting that. And I think that a portion of what Snyder has said in interviews is that you have to feel like, when you watch Man of Steel, Clark Kent isn't quite Superman yet. When you see BVS, he's not Superman. He doesn't become Superman until this Snyder cut. And I think also along the same way, like, you're still seeing like elements of, like, even to this day, like, Barry Allen has never become the Flash on screen. Aquaman wasn't Aquaman until after the events of his own solo movie. And so, like, there's so many different things that I think that is going to apply here with the Batman as well, to where, like, we are seeing this first chapter be very dark, and going on record, like you're saying, to be the darkest Batman to date, because this is an early Bruce Wayne, and this is a Batman that hasn't quite grasped the concepts of being a vigilante and a hero. And I think towards the latter half of this movie, or probably like the last like 20 minutes of this movie, there's a shift in the tone to where you can kind of see he's not just looking to be vengeance incarnate, but he's looking to be a hero and trying to make that transition to be what Gotham needs him to be.
I agree. This is why I also believe that Joker shouldn't be in the sequels, because it's Batman's early years. We find out that the reason he's in Arkham is because that's one of the first, probably year one, he's caught Joker. He's in the asylum. So I believe that it should just focus on stories without having the Joker, because it's set up this groundwork for that to happen. But
so I got a theory for you.
It's hard to say.
So there's a through line that I think that out of every Batman movie we've gotten, this one does a really good job at, we don't necessarily at connecting Batman and Bruce Wayne. They don't just operate individually, but one is the driving force. And so, what I think this film does really well is this film also gives us the Waynes being one of Riddler's targets. And they're doing this because of, quote, the sins of the father. And so you're kind of getting to understand and learn that, like, Bruce Wayne's not as, like, wholesome or as, like, cool as he once thought. And with that whole subplot, you also introduce a man named Edward Elliot, who is a reporter, and I think with that, the last name Elliot, it's also familiar because it also happens to belong to another famous Batman character who is also named Dr. Thomas Elliot, who happens to be Hush. And I think we might be laying the groundwork for Hush. My theory is that Hush could be introduced into another thing where it's like he's not it somehow along the way he finds out that Batman and Bruce Wayne are one and the same. And so he kind of takes on the persona of Hush to basically take down the Batman and kind of like get vengeance for having his father killed.
Yeah, I agree. Or that I think the sequel will either be Hush or The Court of Owls. But yeah, it'll be an interesting take because they wouldn't introduce the reporter and not have that connection. So I would say Matt Reeves is definitely in the groundwork to introduce Hush. I honestly don't know much about Hush, but from what I've seen, it seems like it's a no-brainer to go down that path. And you could also do the Court of Owls as well. I think that'd be a pretty good path to take down as well. But only time will tell what will happen because it's been a box office hit. So our sequel will be coming sooner than later.
I would also say that, like, I think you could do a movie that is like one and the same. Like, somehow, like the Court of Owls, if you've read the comics, you know that the Court of Owls are literally interlined with every crevice of Gotham City. Like, they are kind of that secret society that you think knows everything. They are the secret society that knows everything that happens in Gotham. So I don't think it would be too hard for them to kind of know that Batman and Bruce Wayne are one and the same.
The reason I thought about the Court of Owls is that there's that whole sequence at the nightclub and Catwoman, which we'll talk about the Catwoman because that was incredible. Like when she's got that thing in her eye and he's going around and he's like, Batman is obviously he's blown away by how much corruption there is in this nightclub from the attorneys and everything else. And it's like, and he doesn't even realize how bad Gotham actually is. And just seeing that scene, it's like, you know what? There's definitely more at play here. And it's just a thin layer of what we're seeing, and there's definitely more to come.
Yeah, and also, if I remember correctly, don't quote me on this, but it's been several years since I read the Court of Owls storyline. But the first issue, or like the introductory like issue or second one, I don't know. It's either the first, like, it's within the first 3 issues. Okay. The Bruce Wayne of the New 52 was working on a renewal project. So it's not that hard to say that, like, we could be seeing the Court of Owls. I think you're right. Yeah. I think that something like Club 40 or the 44 below sets a really solid foundation for it to be like a front for the Court of Owls.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree. It's it's a no-brainer for me. It definitely laid the groundwork for that. Can we talk about Catwoman for a bit? Because
dude, I was just about to ask that.
I was talking to a friend about it last night, and he liked his take on Catwoman, but he didn't really like Catwoman as a whole. And I was like, "What? Are you crazy?" Me personally,
heartbreaking.
This version of Catwoman. What I liked about the Batman in general is, even though it wasn't a Bruce Wayne story, it was a Selina Kyle story. It was her story from beginning, middle, and end, and it wraps up her story so well that even at the end of the film, I was like, you know what? Her character is pretty much done. Could come back for a sequel. It could come back, but the way she leaves, it was like, you know what? I'm actually okay with that.
I'm okay with that, but I also disagree with that because
Okay.
the character of Selena Kyle that Zoe Kravitz brilliantly plays, like she was
Oh,
such a highlight for me.
oh,
Um,
100%.
I I I love Catwoman, so um, she's one of my favorite characters in the DC pantheon. That's what I'm trying to say. I love her comics. I love like the animated stuff that she's been in. She's just one of my favorite characters, and uh, given
You
as much like, go ahead.
Oh, sorry. You could feel the connection between Batman and Catwoman. You could feel like, well, when they got close, when even when they kissed, it's just like, I feel that. I feel that heartbreak between them as well. It's something I haven't really witnessed watching a Batman movie before. Like when you see Anne Hathaway's Catwoman in Dark Knight Rises, and it's just like, it honestly, her Catwoman did absolutely nothing for me. Nothing. Um, sorry.
I'm gonna say that like Anne Hathaway was kind of the way that you have the unpopular opinion about Ben Affleck. I
Yeah.
have the unpopular opinion with Anne Hathaway. I really loved Anne Hathaway's take on it. I really was not a huge fan of Anne Hathaway as an actress prior to that movie, and I really loved her. I
Okay.
will say that like in terms of like the cat and bat storyline, I think this is the first time we've truly gotten that. It's been several years since I've seen Batman Returns, so I don't think it feels as natural in that take or in The Dark
Right.
Knight Rises as it does here. I
Mhm.
think that is one thing that I will absolutely agree with you on. I think this film does magnificently is lay a foundation for the cat and the bat.
Yes. No, no, I agree. I agree. The like, I understand what you mean. Like, she leaves at the end. I would definitely bring her back. Um, but the way the whole film goes, I was very surprised because I try to stay away from watching the trailers. I only saw that one trailer at the end with the amazing car chase, by the way, with Batman's upside down and
Yeah,
that's the only trailer
so good.
I watched. So like, and seeing Catwoman's story, I was like, wow, this is the juiciest I've seen. Uh, the story layout for Catwoman, and it was good. And Zoe Kravitz, like, I give her credit. She knocked it out of the water. Like, she was amazing. And I didn't realize how much screen time she would actually have in this 3 hour time frame. Um, question for you: did it feel a
Mhm.
bit too long for you? Was the
It
3 hours
didn't.
a little bit too much?
No. I'm the crazy SOB that watched Snyder Cut back to back last year twice in two sittings.
Amazing.
Um, so as far as like the 3 hours go, like to me, it doesn't feel like it, but it definitely hurts the chances for like the rewatchability for me. I think right
Fair enough.
now I'm kind of like in the hype mode for it. So it's
Yeah.
like, plus going to the theater is like it's an experience. So like, but like the
Yes.
chances of like it being watched at home a lot, like
That's
I
what my
think,
wife said.
yeah,
My wife said, "No, I'm not watching it again because it's too long. It was 3 hours. It tested my patience. It was like, what? Are you kidding me?" See, the thing I liked about was there's no filler in it.
Mhm.
Like, I would say that 3 hour time span. Is there anything I would change? No, no. It is absolutely perfect the way it is. There's nothing I would do differently about the Batman. Um, and another thing I really liked was, usually when you're seeing all these Batman movies, is like the third act is they always go big. And I noticed in this film that they really drew it back. You had the whole interrogation scene with the Riddler, and then the explosions happen, and the flood happens. But for the final action set piece, it wasn't as extravagant as probably a lot of people were expecting it to be. They kind of kind of brought that back a wee bit. And to be honest with you, I thought that really worked, because in Christopher Nolan's Batman films, for example, the third act is always like, oh, it's extravagant, it's massive, and this one just was it was done very subtly, and it was nicely done, actually. It was really nicely done.
I think with that in particular, of what you're talking about, I think that kind of goes to that this is a character study first and foremost. And I think one of the reasons that, to me, like, I said this on our Eternals episode, is that, like, I'm in a state of mind now where I feel burnt out and fatigued by superhero movies. So, like, I won't say that, like, go ahead.
But it made it refreshing, this one. Like, I understand. No, it was fatigue. It was like, and that's why I wasn't really. I didn't really have high expectations for this film. You know, it's like, oh, we get another Batman movie. You know, like, I just saw Ben Affleck's like, there's Batman versus Superman, Justice League, and that, and it's like, oh, now you're doing another take on Batman. So not high expectations. I'm kind of tired from all these superhero movies. But that was different.
Yeah, and it's not just like superhero movies, but now you have the television shows starting to come out, and like you have to like watch those because they're connecting to like the movies you're telling. And I'm just kind of at this point where, like, I'm watching them as not necessarily even as a fan anymore. Like, to me, like, I started watching these movies when I was a teenager, and now I'm an adult. So it's kind of like, for me, like, I feel like there's like a sense of obligation to watch these movies and to keep up with them. But then you gotta get into things like the Suicide Squad or Peacemaker, and then the Batman, and like all of these properties, they feel so virtually different from one another. And the reason that I feel like the Batman works so well is because Matt Reeves knows how to tell a good story that doesn't feel like a genre piece. It feels like it is telling a noir story that just happens to have a guy in it that dresses up like a bat. That's it. And I think that's what...
And the villain that dresses up like the Zodiac Killer.
Yeah, and I mean, I think that's really what makes this film work so well. And like you were saying, like, it makes it feel so refreshing, is because it doesn't rely on those normal tropes. And I'm glad that we're in an era now where DC doesn't feel like they have to compete with Marvel to kind of have these like larger connected things and stories.
Why they did it in the first place.
To me, I think, to me, the reason why they did it was because they were like, oh, Marvel is making $1 billion per movie. We need to connect our things.
Yeah, I know exactly what you mean, but it was like, but the expectations that they had in place was just so unrealistic. It was so unrealistic. Like, Marvel had been making these movies for like 10 years, so of course they got the fan base, and they basically thought it was like, oh, if they can do it, we can just do it right off the first movie. And I was like, well, that's not how it works, but okay.
I'm kind of in the opposite end of the camp, where, like, when we did our Road to Snyder Cut series last year, I think that they had the right intentions, but because they didn't have faith in the filmmakers that they hired, that's the reason why it felt like a jumbled mess. Because it's like, okay, we're going to introduce a version of Superman that isn't quite Superman yet, and we're going to develop him until he finally reaches that. It's a great idea. Then we're going to, in the second movie, we're going to introduce Batman and Wonder Woman, but you're going to set up this Wonder Woman is going to be set up in a prequel. Okay, sure, understand, whatever. But this Batman is going to be warned out, and he's on his own path to redemption. And then somehow we're going to lay the foundations for Justice League. But then you look at the Snyder Cut, and the Snyder Cut, you don't have a fully formed Justice League yet, because we haven't met the Barry, we haven't met the author, we haven't met the Victor yet, and so you're kind of having all of these pieces connected. And I think they did a good job at setting up the 6 members that we got in the original one. But again, they're trying to copy off of Marvel, so it's like instead of having faith in Zack Snyder and also in the director of Wonder Woman, whose name is Patty Jenkins.
Yeah.
Patty Jenkins and David Ayer, instead of having faith in these 3 filmmakers, you are dictating and telling them what they can and cannot use or what can be seen in theaters. And I think when you go and watch something, like I don't necessarily mind the tone of them. I just wish that they would have stuck with it. And I think the studio interference is kind of where you start to get a lot of that messiness, is because, like, just let the filmmakers do it. I mean, you did it for Joker, and you made probably the most money you've made in several years. To take a $50 million movie and turn around and gross $1 billion, like, that's insane.
Because they put the trust into the filmmaker, and the filmmaker delivered, and Joker is absolutely brilliant. And then you get the Batman, which I don't know exactly what the budget is. Well, anyway, between 120 to maybe 150,
somewhere around that,
something like that. And it's a 3-hour movie too. So and it's like, okay, you tell your vision the way you want to do it. Very gritty, very dark. At times it felt like I was watching a low budget movie. like a low budget indie film, and it worked to his advantage. So it shows that DC, they can make good movies, and you don't have to rely on movies that cost $200 million to make these movies.
Yeah, I go ahead.
Sorry, it was just a mistake on their part, because I think they just got too greedy, and they had all these unrealistic expectations instead of just letting it happen.
Yeah, I want to step back from like studio expectations and kind of dive into something we talked about a little bit earlier with Selina, and I think you get this with a lot of the characters, where Selina isn't quite Catwoman yet, and also Penguin is not the Penguin that we know from the comics. Like, he's not the king of the castle yet. And I think that they give you, let me just start by saying, Colin Farrell in this movie, not just the fact that he looks unrecognizable, but he is absolutely just insanely, incredibly just electrifying in this movie. He's incredible, and really transformative.
Yeah, he really soaks up the screen. Like, I couldn't believe how good he was. I've always liked Colin Farrell. I think he's always been a great actor, very underrated, mind you. And him as Penguin, wow. And I was reading that he's getting his own spin-off as well, which is really cool. Not what I was expecting, to be honest with you. I thought it was going to be good, but I didn't think it would be that good, to be honest. And it was more like an extended cameo for the Penguin. Like, he was in it, but he wasn't really the center of the story or anything like that. And it worked really well, and it planted the seeds for future installments to come.
I'm so glad that you kind of took and called him an extended cameo, because that's really what he feels like. He never once feels like he's the central antagonist. No. He just happens to kind of be, as he puts it in the movie, not necessarily with them. It just happens to be coming out alongside them.
Yes.
And I love how they lay that groundwork for him, where he is not necessarily this important figure yet, but he's kind of working his way up the reins, you can see, because like he's the proprietor of the biggest club in Gotham. He's also the proprietor of the club within the club, as Selena calls it. And he's also the right-hand man for Carmine Falcone, who is the city's like crime boss and just system, basically. And I love that final shot that we get of him kind of looking out over the city, because my theory is that coming into the HBO series is that they're going to be kind of really allowing him to kind of make that transition for him to actually be a legitimate threat to the Batman.
Yeah, no, I agree. It'll be interesting what they do with the spinoff. Well, I can't get over how good he was. Honestly, like I really didn't expect it. You know,
Yeah,
and the thing I really liked about it was we got a side of the Penguin that we weren't really told of before in previous iterations. I don't know much about that TV show that was it Gotham? Was that the show Gotham? I don't know much about Penguin. I never watched it, but
it had its moments.
Yeah, it had its moments. Like it didn't seem too promising. But like from previous Batman films, I've never seen a Penguin, the character, set up like that. You know, and it was brilliant. It was really well done.
I will say though, as much as I not necessarily I like Gotham, I didn't necessarily love it. I will say Robin Lord Taylor was one of the highlights of that show. His take on Penguin is really awesome. And if you watch it for nothing else, I would definitely watch it for his performance and kind of where the show takes his arc over 5 years. And I am, when it comes to comics, I tend to skip over Penguin-centric arcs in the comics. I'm not a Penguin fan. And Colin Farrell kind of really kind of made me second look at that, to where when they announced the HBO Max series, I was like, come on, man, like why not like give us like a Riddler spinoff or like Catwoman spinoff?
He's like the kingpin of the Marvel universe. That
Yeah.
final shot when he's in the building, he's staring out. I was like, dude, that's your kingpin. You're now kingpin. Like that's fantastic. I did not see that coming at all.
How would you guys like to help us get mental health resources into schools, conventions, and other events? Well, now you can. Simply go to patreon.com/victims and villains for as little as $1 a month. You guys can help us get mental health resources into current and upcoming generations, educate and break down stigma surrounding mental health, suicide, and depression. And you get exclusive content that you can't get anywhere else. And you guys can tell us which Nicolas Cage movie you want us to cover, and we'll do it. All it takes to get started is to go to patreon.com/victims and villains, or simply click the link in the episode description wherever you guys are currently listening or streaming this episode. Pick your tier and get started today. Yes, it's that simple. So quickly select the tier that you want and help us get hope into the hands of the depressed and the suicidal today.
He really is. And like after like coming out of it, like I put this in our not spoiler free review, that I was not expecting to come out of this movie and just being so enthralled by Colin Farrell's performance, where I was just like, dude, like I am really now looking forward to this spinoff show. Like, I want to see more with what he can do to this character. And I am part of the reason that I love trilogies is because, and one of the reasons I think Matt Reeves was the perfect person for this is you look at what he did previously with Planet of the Apes. Yeah. Planet of the Apes, when you go back and when you watch the original 1967 movie, is it 68?
Could be 60. Could be 67, but it could be it's plus or minus. How's that?
Yeah. The original one from the 60s, Caesar is this like iconic character that has meant so much to the lore. And he's kind of like the kingpin that initially started the transformation to where we initially see it, and getting to kind of see his origin story laid out over 3 films was incredible, to where when you meet him in the first one, he's not the Caesar that you know. And even when the war for the Planet of the Apes ends, he's not necessarily the Caesar that we know, but he's pretty damn near close.
Yeah.
And I think that we've talked about Selena, watching this movie, you're seeing these characters, but they haven't reached their final forms yet. Even Matt Reeves has gone on to talk about like the fact that like Zoe-Kravitz hasn't become Catwoman yet. You have Jeffrey Wright hasn't become Commissioner Gordon yet. You have Colin Farrell that hasn't become truly the Penguin yet. Like, yes, he's a Penguin in name alone, but not like the Kingpin. Even the Riddler, which I thought was interesting, hasn't reached the Riddler standpoint, because Paul Dano feels pretty darn near close to the comics.
No, yeah, he's a scene stealer. Like he was, wow. Wow. The thing was so great about the Riddler was there's the scene in the diner, and I'm glad they didn't show it in the trailer. He goes down into the table and he's staring at the Batman the whole time, smiling, and you just see that sinister look in him, and it's just like oh, it's so good. And then it follows with the interrogation scene, and it's just like, they couldn't have gotten a better person to play the Riddler, and not what I was expecting.
Yeah, I've seen Dano do a couple of like smaller projects, and I definitely think this is the biggest thing I've ever seen him in. And when they announced that he was going to be playing the Riddler, like I knew that it was going to be good, but I wasn't prepared for how good it was.
Yeah.
Dano just does an incredible job, and really commits to the method acting too. One of the things that like I didn't catch on my first viewing, but like in the climax where they're at the arena, you get to see how like the Riddler copycats basically have like saran wrap that's wrapped around their head. Yeah. They never explain that. But apparently when they were shooting this movie, he actually he had it on his head, and then he actually had it all over his body too. So he really truly committed to this role.
Yeah. Weird. The things actors do to get into the characters, man.
Like, I don't understand the point of the saran wrap. I understand that it's like supposed to like prevent you from sweating, but like I don't get it in terms of like the Riddler copycats.
Yeah.
I don't know.
I don't get it. Hey, it works. It worked. Well, what can I say? It worked.
It absolutely does work, and I think that Dano being the guy that we spend around, some of my favorite sequences in this movie, like stepping back from this movie real quick, The Dark Knight. The main reason that I watched that movie and I love that movie as much as I do is because of Heath Ledger's Joker, and like I could probably care less about like the whole like Lau and like mafia thing and like the Maroni stuff. Like I don't really care about a lot of that subplot stuff and the Bruce Wayne stuff. But like this one, like I'm so enthralled because it's not just Robert Pattinson and it's such a compelling Batman story, but also I think sometimes your stories are only as good as the villains in the stories.
Yeah,
I think is the saying.
Yeah, it's like a James Bond movie. The only as good as what the villain is, and it's the same with Batman. The Batman can only be as good as how good the villains are. You have a really good villain, then you're gonna have a really good Batman, and that's why Paul Dano is the Riddler. Incredible. It's and the thing is, like I see people online, they're comparing like the Batman. Some people saying it's better than Dark Knight, and people saying it's not as good as the Dark Knight. Me personally, I can't compare the two. If I'm going to compare the Batman, it's going to be to Batman Begins, and the reason why, because it's the start of a trilogy, not into a trilogy. if that makes sense. So, like me personally, yes, I would say the Batman is better than Batman Begins for the start of a trilogy. But it's hard to compare it to The Dark Knight because they're two very different movies.
That is a very valid and interesting look at that. I've never kind of thought about it in that way, and I'm really glad that you kind of brought it up and to kind of put it into that context, because I think it really does help you kind of see things in a different light.
Yeah. The Dark Knight trilogy is Bruce Wayne's story, of him fighting to be Batman. Because and when you look at Dark Knight Rises, it's him don't want to be Batman. He wants to hang up the mantle. The Batman start of the trilogy, it's all going to be about the Batman. So it's like you can't compare the two, but you can compare it to start of trilogies with Batman Begins. And for that, I would say the Batman is better.
Yeah, I definitely agree. And yeah, so like coming not to I don't want to backtrack, but like I feel like I still had things to say about like the Riddler because like
backtrack what you want. So I get ahead of myself at times.
I think the Riddler is like I think you were talking about it a couple minutes ago. Like Riddler, there's just such a glue to him that is like your eyes just automatically stick to him every time he comes on the screen.
Yeah.
And I love the fact that like this is a Riddler that I was sharing this with a buddy of mine today. Like the Riddler, I feel like sometimes gets lumped in with the campiness of the comics to where like Riddler always never feels like he's kind of like gotten away from that Jim Carrey persona from Batman Begins. And I feel like in the comics, like there's only one arc that I can think of that the Riddler's the main villain in that kind of resets him as like this dark, really primal force for Batman, not just in like mind, but also at the same time as in like a legitimate persona. Because Paul Dano's character even says it during the interrogation scene. He's like, I was, I'm strong up here, pointing to his mind, but I can't do the physical things. That's and yet somehow yeah, exactly. But yeah, somehow along the way, like he ends up killing like 3 people, if not more in this movie. So I think that, they made him a very formidable villain and like reinvented the character at the same time to like be this grounded approach and say, okay, we're going to do this. And it's going to be kind of almost like the Zodiac Killer. I think when you look at throughout history, like the Zodiac Killer is definitely the closest we got to Riddler.
Yeah. Another thing I really liked as well was like, even though Riddler was a major threat throughout the whole film, there was these nice little side stories that happened as well. It's like, and it was just to take a break from the Riddler and to tell all these different side stories as well, was still making you believe, still making you think it's like, oh, but the Riddler is still happening. It's like when you watch the trailer and you see the first shot and it's in the diner, I'm thinking to myself, oh, in the film, it's Riddler's going to get captured probably like either an hour into the film or maybe 90 minutes into the film, and it's going to unravel that way. And you see it's literally like probably like 2 hours and 15 minutes into the film he gets captured.
Yeah,
give or take. And it's just like, oh, this is not what I was expecting at all. So so the film does keep you on your toes and keeps you guessing.
I love the fact too that we don't get the capture of the Riddler until it's like way too late.
Yeah.
And I think that this is such a spectacular thing that like I feel like it's so easy for us to kind of like look at like the interrogation scene from The Dark Knight and be like, oh no, he wanted to be captured for X, Y, or Z reasons. Like, I love the fact that like there's no escaping in this universe, that like it actually feels like once you get locked up in Arkham, like you're there to stay.
Yeah.
Like going back to the Joker, like I always kind of thought that was like one of the dumbest things that they've ever done for stories, is that Arkham feels like a revolving door. And it's like, if you're going to ground this in real life, like security for like these types of antagonists are going to be incredibly tight.
I love the whole insecurities. Like when he finds that his plan has foiled and Batman has saved the day, and he's in the cell, and he's like, it's like his insecurities. It's like, this is not how I planned it, and he's like freaking out, and then the Joker gets introduced, and he's just basically like, no, there's you always love a comeback story, and it's just like, what, you know?
Yeah, and I'm almost kind of like, out of all the moving parts that are in the course of this, I am definitely curious for where the Riddler plays next, because you talked earlier about like how Catwoman's story feels complete. And I would argue that like there's still a story to tell there, but I guess like the Riddler story feels the most complete to me, but also at the same time, like there are also elements of, and I don't know if this is just like the mindset that I've adopted from like other comic book movies, where like villains just feel like they're one and done. Like you look at like what Marvel has done outside of Loki and outside of Thanos, every other villain that we have seen come into contact has been a one-off, and they have either been captured or they died at the end of their movies. And that to me is kind of what I expected for the Riddler, but I'm curious because you bring up a good point. And about it being, the comeback story, but also too, the did you stay for the post credit scene?
Yeah, I read about that afterwards. I was like, oh, okay.
so Ratalata, I think that's how you say it. Ratalata. I don't know. It's like it's Spanish. It was kind of like if you hear that website, like they give you riddles, and like you can like download like special like bonus stuff.
And then you get like a surprise at the end.
Yeah, so like one of the ciphers that came out of it is every end is a new beginning. So like a lot of people are insinuating that like he's going to come back, but I'm curious as to what fashion you come back.
But the only way I can see him coming back is if they do. This is why I think the Arkham, they call it Arkham State Hospital in this film. So I'll just call it Arkham Asylum. So Arkham Asylum should be the third movie. And the reason I say that is if the comeback story is going to happen, the comeback story would be Batman in Arkham Asylum for the third movie. And I would also bring back Catwoman, because I wouldn't bring her back for the second movie, but I would bring her back for the third movie and have Batman escaping Arkham or whatever. And then having all the villains that they capture, and then maybe introducing Joker as the puppet behind. He's dangling all the strings, and that's how that would happen.
I'm almost curious if like we get it in like a sense of like what you're talking about with like Arkham Asylum, to where like no one is really the like central antagonist, but it's like all of the like villains are connected to one central villain, kind of the way that it is here, where you have Carmine Falcone is kind of like the closest we get to like a secondary villain, but like he's connected to the Riddler, and also you have Colin Farrell's Penguin also connected to that, and then you have other people involved in that with the district attorney Gil Colson, and the mayor, and then you also have Pete Savage also into that. And again, I gather that like some of those are not really straight up villains, they're kind of just greedy guys, but tomato, tomato. With that, yeah, I think that you also, I think coming back for Riddler, I think my theory is that we're not gonna get to see him in a big role like this. I think that he's going to be the equivalent of what Scarecrow was for the Dark Knight trilogy, where you had the actor play the big bad for the first film and then kind of came back in cameos for the latter two films. That's my theory on where you go for the Riddler, but also at the same time, I'm optimistic that we're going to see him kind of play a larger role moving down the line.
Yeah, or you can see him in the TV show, the Arkham Asylum TV show.
I think you will, but again, let's talk about the Arkham Asylum TV show real quick, because I'm curious where you go with that. I don't know anything about that particular one, and I don't even know if it's really necessary at that point as well.
No, I agree. I don't know what we can possibly do with Arkham Asylum, to be honest with you. They say it's going to be like a horror movie. It doesn't really tell me
much. So, if history has taught us anything, we go back to James Wan's Aquaman, where we were supposed to get a prequel movie called The Trench that was going to be a straight-up horror movie.
Yeah.
That is now no longer a thing. And that honestly kind of scares me. For the Arkham Asylum, I feel like an Arkham Asylum spinoff that is going to be horror centric. I don't think that works. Because you limit there are only certain villains that you can really put into the category of horror. And I think there are some that you can kind of like finagle and like reset their origins, and that's how you can make them. But I think Batman, I don't think it necessarily works for this universe quite yet. And another reason why is because I don't feel like I feel like maybe between like a second and third Batman movie, like Arkham Asylum fits, because I think right now where we're sitting, this feels too early in the career of Batman to even entertain the idea of larger Arkham Origins or Arkham Asylum stories.
Yeah, because we're getting what? We're getting a Penguin spin-off. We're now getting Arkham Asylum. Was the Arkham Asylum the one that was supposed to be the Gotham? Or is that another one as well?
So that's actually another one. And my theory for the Gotham PD is actually going to be, they've said it's going to take place within the first year of the Batman. So my theory is that it is going to tell the story of the Maroney crime bust that we hear so much about throughout the course of this film.
Well, no, that's an interesting take on it. I think we should talk about the one thing we haven't mentioned yet. Do you know what it is?
I mean, you could talk about the cinematography. We could talk about the music.
No, I'll give you a guess. It's character-wise. There's a character we haven't even mentioned yet.
Well, that could be Jeffrey Wright's take on James Gordon.
No,
that could be.
Yeah, we haven't mentioned that either. But I was going to see Alfred.
John Turturro's Carmine Falcone. But yeah, Andy Serkis as Alfred is interesting to me because I kind of feel like for me, I feel like we don't have enough to kind of go off of to kind of make any judgments, because to me, he feels like an extended cameo kind of doesn't really make a stamp the way that Farrell does.
Yeah, I would say if there's one issue I have with the film, now that I think of it, is when he opens the package and the explosion happens and we're supposed to go, oh shit, is Alfred dead? Now, at first I was like, oh my gosh, did they kill off Alfred? But then I thought about it, I was like, you know what? It's missing that emotional punch. And the reason I say that is because there's not enough of Alfred connecting. Because we only see Alfred really during the Bruce Wayne scenes. Do we even see Alfred with Batman? It's just, or is it just Bruce Wayne?
It's only Bruce Wayne. You do see him when he kind of comes back and he's trying to solve, like he's like taking notes about like his like first night. But you don't really see him in the suit.
So that's because we only see like maybe 10 to 15 minutes of Bruce Wayne. So we're supposed to connect with Alfred and Bruce Wayne. So when that explosion happens, like, oh shit. But it's just like, if that's my only critique from the film, it's like I didn't feel as much because there wasn't enough of Alfred before that.
Yeah, I know. I can 100% respect that and get on board with that, because it does struggle very much to kind of set that out there. I think that Serkis does a good job for what he's given. But I also think at the same time, like, there's not enough, like you're saying, like emotional connection to that character to really make an impact. And I would say that, like, this movie was very bold, so I was kind of expecting Alfred to die in this movie. When the explosion happened, I was like, I wouldn't put it past Matt Reeves, because, you know, I just wouldn't. He just seems like a bold filmmaker, so why not?
Like I read the stakes are high. I was like, okay, somebody's gonna die. I was like, so when that happens, like, oh, he's dead. There's no way he's surviving that.
No, yeah, and like too, like with this one as well. I think that I think you also. I have a love-hate relationship with Alfred in this movie, and the reason I have is because when you look at the grand scheme of this movie, as we've been talking about, like, so much of this movie feels like it's all Batman. And Alfred is a Bruce Wayne character.
Yes.
Through and through.
Yes.
And he just kind of feels like he's there because you have to accept that, like, Bruce Wayne is a part of Batman's story. Yeah. And by comparison, you also have to have Alfred. And on the flip side, though, is I feel like you also need him because he humanizes this character and allows him to kind of have some levity that I feel like would be otherwise absent.
Yeah, like there's the scene in the hospital where he's in the recovery, and he has his like crazy monologue, and I was like, you know what, that's a really good speech, but I wanted more of that before. So if I got that before and then that happened, I would be like, okay, that emotional, because there's emotional connection between pretty much every other character in the movie, except for Alfred. And that was probably the only frustrating part, because it is a Batman movie, it's not a Bruce Wayne movie. So.
And to me, I feel like as a viewer and as a Batman fan, I feel like you don't get that connection without him. And I feel like, you know, we were exploring so many other dynamics that you had to have it, but I feel like the chemistry and the relationship between Bruce Wayne, I feel like and Alfred, the characterizations that you get was enough to intrigue me for future installments. Yes. But I also, because of how busy the film is, I didn't necessarily feel like I needed either one of those relationships kind of expanded upon.
Yeah, you could. I would even go and say that if Alfred wasn't in the movie, it probably wouldn't change the film that much.
No, I think that you're absolutely right. I for me, I would also say that, like, Alfred being here in the film feels more like a service to the Batman mythos than it does the actual narrative.
Yeah, I agree. It's a shame, but it was still good. It was just I just wanted more of it, and you know. But I really liked how Commissioner Gordon worked with Batman in this movie. And he brings them in on the crime scenes, and you have the police officer they're like, oh, what's he doing here? And it's just like, it's like this is a completely different take on on what we have previously seen. And it's just like oh, it works so well. It works so well.
Yeah, I agree 100%. Is like, this is not a, and again, talking about this with friends, one of the things that, you can't help but kind of, anytime you get a reboot like this, you kind of can't help but compare of other the way past cinematic interpretations have done it. And this is the first time that we've ever actually seen a Batman Gordon relationship that is very much a detective story, and B, a story that feels like a buddy cop duo. And you've only ever up to this point ever seen Batman and Gordon meet on rooftops or meet in crime scenes and exchange information. And then they kind of go their separate ways. But this one, they have a real working relationship that I think works really well. And I love Jeffrey Wright's take on this character. I think that it's gritty, but it's also at the same time, like, you can kind of still see that he's still trying to learn and navigate his own ways around Gotham City. Like, this to me feels like a fresh out of year one take on Gordon, where he's kind of learned that, like, Gotham is corrupt, but yet he's not necessarily judging other cops for it. He's taking the alternative route to work with Batman to kind of balance out the toxicity of the work environment.
Yeah, because he's like, it's like, oh, is everyone in Gotham corrupt? And it's like he's too innocent, to understand. Batman's like, oh, he's corrupt, that's corrupt, that's corrupt, and it's just like, holy crap, sort of thing. And it was nice because when Falcone gets taken out, and he's like, I own everybody, and the doors open, they go, oh, the cops there, and it's just like, well, not everybody. And it was just like, and it just shows that humanize that situation. It's like there are actually good people in Gotham.
Yeah, one of those characters that I really love. It's such a side character, but I think Officer Martinez is also a really solid addition to this story, who's played by Gil Perez Abraham. I think he is one of my favorite characters in this. He seems like such a throwaway character at the beginning of the story, and I didn't notice it until my second time watching it, but he is the officer that Batman interacts with most outside of Gordon. And I just really loved their dynamic, to where, like, it wasn't very, like, he goes from calling Batman a freak to, like, actually, like, trusting his insights, to where, like, it's the two of them that actually find out about the Joker's grand plan to kind of level the city, or at least, like, flood it.
Yeah, I love it. I like it too, because like there's the one scene with the carpet thing, and he's like saying, "Oh, it's that carpet thing to lift up the carpet," and Batman's like, "Oh, how do you know that?" I'm thinking to myself, "Oh, wait a second, he's working with the Riddler." This is just what I thought right off the bat, because it's like, "Oh, he's the bomb," but it's like, "Oh, no," and he has to get his story correct, and it's like, oh, okay, no, that makes sense. So, but the interaction between him and Batman, fantastic.
Yeah, I agree. Oh, snap.
Oh, snap.
Well, I just came across this article. Apparently, we are no longer seeing a Gotham. This comes from the Direct, so I don't actually know how reliable this source is. But it says, quote, the Batman is in theaters worldwide, and it's wiping the floor with the competition at the box office. The Matt Reeves directed now has become the second highest grossing film to debut in theaters since the pandemic started, coming in behind the clear winner in Spider-Man No Way Home. with such strong momentum, it's doubtful that Warner Brothers will want to keep the Batman IP dormant for long. Besides being within the next 5 years, the release date for uh, outing as the Dark Knight, Robert Pattinson's outing as the Dark Knight is unknown. Thankfully, fans will not have to wait long. Gotham has now, HBO now has 2 shows set in the Gotham universe streaming in development for its streaming platform. One of them will follow the Penguin as he rises to power in Gotham following the events of the first film. The second show is Gotham PD, which originally said to take place a year before the Batman and follow the infamous police department. However, it now looks as plans have changed drastically for that second show. Instead, it seems the core focus will be taken off the police and placed firmly on the Arkham Asylum. So we are no longer getting a Gotham City show. Interesting.
Yeah, I think I read that. Yeah. So yeah, now we're going an Arkham show. I can only see an Arkham show being like a limited series. I can't see it being like a couple seasons. Like if you're gonna do it, it's gonna be like, I can't see it being any more than 6 episodes. Like honestly, like what are you gonna do?
That's the thing is like that's another thing is like I can't necessarily see this show working as a long-term series like you're saying, but I also can't see it, as I was saying earlier, going and doing a like I can't see it until like it's after the events of like the second and third film.
What are they gonna do? Like, New Mutants? But Arkham Asylum?
Dude, I really hope not, man. I really, really hope not.
Oh, it just doesn't sound. It seemed like the type of show that you would, like you said, like you bring after the sequel, even after the third film, you bring Arkham Asylum. When the foundation is in place, it just seems way too early to introduce this. But Matt Reeves is on board, so obviously he's got ideas that we have no idea about.
Yeah, and if that's the case, like I'm gonna be here for it because I am cautiously curious about stuff like this. Yeah, I was this time last year. I was saying the same thing when the news for Peacemaker broke, and then I saw the first trailer for it and the series, as you can hear in our episode we put out a couple weeks ago. I was floored by how good that series was, and I think that if you're going to have a director that is involved with whether that's a writing process or producing process or even a directing, and they're involved some way creatively, I have more hope for that series.
Yeah, I was reading earlier that when Batman is hanging from that thing, I can't even get my words out. He's hanging from that thing, and after he's been shot in the chest, and he gets up, and Catwoman attacks, and he's down on the ground, and he injects himself with something. Okay, I was reading that they were saying, he injected himself with venom,
Yeah.
and it's just like, and I'm thinking to myself, wow. When I was watching, I didn't get that at all. I just thought he just injected himself with adrenaline and just went up and kicked some ass, And they're like, oh, that could be like an introduction to Bane. And I was like, I don't know. I don't know if I buy that so much.
I have a love-hate relationship with this theory. It is comically accurate. Alan Grant did a great job when he introduced this compound into the Batman mythos. I want to say it was like 3 or 4 years before we ever got introduced to Bane. I think that the Venom storyline is one of the most underrated Batman storylines from the 80s and early 90s. Just because it showed a really vulnerable Bruce Wayne. And it kind of explores him going through addiction. And I I think introducing that early, I think not only shows how intelligent this Bruce Wayne is, but also at the same time, it does lay the groundwork for Bane.
It can actually
I,
lay the groundwork for Arkham Asylum.
it could.
And you could have
But
Hugo Strange in there too.
I would love to see Hugo Strange. But in order for a Bane character to work, you have to expand the world to South America, where he is from. Central America, one of the two. But I like that theory. I also thought it was adrenaline the first time I saw it, and then as we were walking out of the theater, someone was like, "Oh yeah, what if they introduced Venom?" And I'm like, I mean, it's the same color because like adrenaline is like white. It's like a white or like a nearly white, like beigeish color. So like it makes more sense, like color, like aesthetically, color palette, like visually aesthetically speaking, to be Venom.
It could be.
You
Like, I mean, all I remember is he injected. I didn't remember what the color was or anything like that. So I was like, oh. Then afterwards, it's like, oh, it's Venom. And I was like, okay. nice little hint, I guess.
So some of the last winding down on this, John Turturro in this as Carmine Falcone is one of the best parts in this movie. I think that like he kind of takes this modern day gangster approach to be kind of like scary, but also at the same time, like what I imagined if I was going to meet someone in the mafia or like someone with these kind of like drug connections, like this is how I imagined someone would be speaking.
Oh yeah. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it was great. It was creepy, and I liked how it all connected with Selena Kyle as well with Falcone. I thought that was quite good.
Yeah.
And John Turturro played he was great. He was great. It was just like he had a heart and he just didn't care at the same time. And it was just like, it was a character that you wanted to feel like.
Yeah, and I love it too that like, and don't quote me on this, I honestly don't know, but the whole fact of like her being a Falcone's daughter, I really liked too. I thought it was
was that in the comics?
That's the thing that I don't know. I'm a huge Catwoman fan. I've been going back and rereading some of like the early solo stuff, and I haven't come across anything like that yet. So like in any interpretation that I've seen yet, I haven't actually come across that.
Okay. Because I wasn't sure. I wasn't sure. Couldn't it be, but to be honest with you, for the movie version, it works. It works really well, and it's something I didn't see coming. It's a good twist.
And it creates a emotional connection to not only her past, but also at the same time Falcone and why she is also at the 44 Below and the Iceberg Lounge. I thought was a really nice twist as well.
I agree. Like the thing I liked about it was a Batman story. It was a Selena Kyle story, more of a Selena Kyle story of her reaching her character arc, and that's why I was saying that I'd be okay with Catwoman not returning in a sequel, because I felt like it did wrap up her character quite well, finding out that Falcone's her father, he dies at the end. She can't be with Batman even though she wants to be with Batman, and she leaves at the end, and Batman's like, no, I have to stay in Gotham, and I'm not the type of person you are, and just how everything just all comes together. It's just good.
Yeah, and also too with that, I think we've talked about it a little bit throughout the course of this. I think that this does a really good job of kind of bringing Bruce Wayne's mental health to a really applicable level to where you're watching this character who kind of thinks that he knows how the system works and kind of really wants to kind of take it down, but also at the same time has to learn that like he has to humble himself and kind of learn the ropes and be patient. And I think that sometimes that's kind of hard for people to, who want to have change, or like you're going through like depression, or feeling suicidal, or going through addiction, whatever the case is that is kind of weighing on your mental health. We expect change now, and sometimes change is you have to go through it at your own pace, and you have to you know be able to walk through it at your own pace. And
That's
I
why
think sometimes that might be difficult for people.
yeah, that's why there's this powerful scene I thought after the first murder, and Batman finds out that the little kid finds his dead body, his father's body, and they're trying to usher him out, and he looks at the kid and he's on the bed, and it's like, you can see the pain in Batman's eyes. He didn't even say anything. You just see the pain in his eyes. And it's like, I've been in that situation. I know how you feel, and there's something I want to do to help you. I can't help you. Then at the end of the film, then he goes to help the people in the water, and the kid gives him his hand, and it's just like, it comes full circle, and it's just like there is, I live with pain, but I am here to help you, and it connects beautifully.
Yeah, I absolutely adore those shots where you can kind of see, um, kind of, you see that he's processing a lot of that stuff, and he's like really affected by what he's seeing. And that's one of the reasons that I argue that Pattinson is such a great Batman, is because there are moments within this film where he doesn't literally have to say anything at all, and he's able to convey how he's mentally feeling. It's simply by the way that his his facial features or his body language is. And I think that sometimes, we can try to hide a lot of the things that we're feeling inside, because mental health is uncomfortable to talk about, but also at the same time, like, your body language and your facial features are going to give you away. Unless you're like a Oscar winning actor or actress, it's very much almost impossible to kind of hide such things.
Yes, exactly. Like when Bruce Wayne's parents died, Bruce Wayne. Oh,
You're good.
Oh, yeah, okay, okay, just checking. So when Bruce Wayne's parents died, Bruce Wayne died. So he took the persona of Batman, and that's his way of coping his family's legacy through the eyes of Batman and not Bruce Wayne.
No, I think you're right to, like, I think that's such a great example to kind of do it, is like to compare it to, is like the moment that you experience death, or the moment that like Bruce Wayne experiences death, he takes on a whole new persona as Batman. Like that's the moment that Batman is born. And so much of, and I think you get to see it here in the interrogation scene with the Riddler, where the Riddler basically approaches him. He's like, I can tell that like the person underneath that mask isn't the real you, but this person, this persona, this is the real you. And I think that is so accurate to where you're like, man, like that's really true. Like it is, at the end of the day, like it is always going to be, um the Batman is always going to be the true face of who those dual characters are. Bruce Wayne is the mask.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. That's when he's like, that's when Alfred says, like, you have to keep yourself, your Bruce Wayne, as your family's legacy. And he's like, I am doing my family's legacy. I'm doing this. And it's like, and in Alfred's eyes, he doesn't understand, but we as an audience was like, yes, because Bruce Wayne is dead. It's Batman that lives on, and I think that's a nice reflection to that compared to Nolan's ones, Batman films, because when Bruce Wayne lost his parents, he lived with the guilt, and always lived with the guilt of him losing his parents, and he like
Yeah,
died inside. So
yeah.
seeing this version, it's a different take on it, but I think works a lot better.
Yeah, I think I agree full-heartedly with what you're saying, because it feels like this Bruce Wayne, the reason why we're spending so much time with this Batman is because this is who he really is.
Yeah.
I think that when you lose someone to death, there's a part of it that you're never quite the same ever again. And having lost people to like natural causes and like also like diseases like cancer and um, you know, dementia. Uh, I think that, I understand the gravity of losing someone to that, but then losing someone to suicide is also another thing that's like, man, it's like you're never quite the same after that. And that's what I really like about the way that they're exploring this themes of death, is that it's like, this is a real reflection of like what it's like to lose someone. Like, you're going to come away from this and be changed. Like, death changes you.
Yeah, it does. It does, 100%, 100%. And that's why I felt coming out. It's like, I feel his pain, and he just wants to do good, and I feel his pain because he just wants things to go back to normal, and he knows it can't.
Yeah, I 100% agree. And so I think we've kind of stretched it on this one.
What we at?
We're good to go. I mean, we're good on time. It is what it is, man. But Batman is now playing in theaters everywhere. Let us know what you guys think about this movie. Obviously, we are both huge fans of it.
What would you give it out of 10?
It is it's a 10 out of 10 for me.
Yeah, I probably
I love this movie.
I'd probably give it 9.5, just because of the critique with Alfred.
That's fair.
Yeah,
that's absolutely fair.
It's a must see. Go see it on the biggest screen possible. If you go see it on IMAX if you can. IMAX is the way to go. Fortunately, I didn't get to see it on IMAX, but bigger the better. You don't wait for home video. Go to see it in the cinemas.
IMAX is spectacular. I can attest to that. And this film looks gorgeous in IMAX.
Oh, you saw it in IMAX?
I did. I saw it the first night in IMAX. So
jealous. They closed the IMAX cinema down here. So,
I'm so sorry.
I'd have to go down to England or someplace to go see it in IMAX, and it's like, oh, that's not happening.
No, I'm so sorry, man. Well, all right. Well, Stuart, you're going to have your Virginia premiere of your film Edwin here playing during our mental health block on April 30th, 2022 at the Alamo Drafthouse in Winchester, Virginia, part of Horrific Hope. It'll also be playing with Demented, Escape, A Ghost Story, and While Mortals Sleep. Are you working on anything right now?
Yeah, actually, I have another film that's in festivals called My Dying Heart. It's a film that you probably really like because it deals with mental health. It's about a young man who struggles with isolation and his anxiety during a pandemic. And there's some pretty good twists and turns in that as well. And I am also working on another film called Mr. E. And it's about an online film festival being blackmailed into potentially screening a snuff film.
You had my interest right there, that last one. I don't know what it is about, like, I would never watch a snuff film, but the idea of like movies that revolve around snuff films and plot devices kind of intrigued me. I don't know why. Ever since I saw 8mm, I'm just like, okay. But yeah, I can't wait to see both of those. Well, cool. So where can people follow you online?
Yeah, so you can find me either on my YouTube channel. If you go to YouTube and you just type in hologram pictures, we have a YouTube channel, or if you can follow us on Instagram through at hologram pictures, and you can see all the cool stuff that we're currently doing.
We're really excited to have you guys as a part of our lineup this year. Yeah, so you guys can follow me. I'm at Captain Nostalgia on Letterboxd, but you guys can follow Victims and Villains. If you guys go to victimsandvillains.net, you guys can find links to more podcasts like this. All of our social media, we are on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, Twitch, YouTube, wherever you guys get your podcasts from, and Patreon. It'll also get you access to our full lineup for Horrific Hope. Check out our sponsors, which this episode is sponsored by You Have to Watch This Podcast, Fierce Literature, Ride the Omnibus podcast, as well as Hard Talks and Hard Hats podcast. And you guys can also find links to all of their stuff on our social media page, as well as, most importantly, our mental health resource library, all of which you guys can find links for in the show notes below. Thank you guys so much for tuning in and taking a trip with us to Gotham City. Until next time, buckle up the Batmobile, stay safe. We'll see you guys soon.